So I don't know, there's like 2 weeks until Advent starts. It's a weird, funky window. It's only 2 weeks. So do you just make it like a throwaway series? And I thought, nah, let's just be super eccentric for like 2 weeks. And, of course, we all have Thanksgiving on the mind, on the brain. Even though I have to say, after Halloween, the literal day after Halloween, I had to send Mallory a video. I'm in HEB, and they were already playing Christmas music. So I think we're like 5 years from just skipping over Thanksgiving and it just being a meal called like Christmas lunch or something. I think that's where we're headed. But while it's still Thanksgiving, I thought we would kind of take a look at the life and the times and the ministry of Jesus, and kind of in chronological order. Like, I wanted to high level look at every situation where he was gathered around food, and like what he taught, and what were the interactions, and just how you're going to have in a little over 2 weeks. He had a ton of opportunities where this was literally the situation. And some of the most impactful things he would teach or do, ironically, were in the context of food, meals, good friends, some enemies, a little bit of that, gotcha moments, the whole thing, the whole gamut. That may very well be waiting on some of you in the next couple of weeks. And these were the experiences of Jesus. We see he's in a meal. It's a party. And there's a problem in that the wine for the event is about to run out. Well, with Jesus, no wine, no problem. See, so that's the first thing that happened. See, right out of the gate is Jesus would bring at the wedding at Cana. He would supply the wine for the party, and they would be blown away because they were like, this is the best. You waited till the end to bring out the best stuff. And to put it bluntly, they were like, normally you do the good stuff first, you wait till everybody's drunk, and then you give them the cheap, lousy wine, and no one knows the difference. So like, but you came strong at the end. Like, what's going on? And it's this whole thing that starts the beginning of Jesus' ministry, this magical, amazing, powerful, supernatural thing that he would start becoming this thing in his culture that would start this tsunami that would finally kind of reach its high point of Holy Week, because it would become one win after another win and another moment in time, and that's what would happen. And it's so interesting because it would also be with a meal with Jesus when he'd first call Levi. Levi, if you didn't know Levi's a tax collector. And if you didn't realize it, Levi's the one who ends up writing the book of Matthew. And if you weren't aware of how that would work, the way that they would tax people 2,000 years ago is, in order to know what you really had at home, what were your true assets, you'd have to pick someone indigenous to the culture. In other words, he had to be one of you. And then he'd go work for Rome. And then the guy above him would say, hey, it's going to cost 10 whatever. And he would go, well, I want to get paid. Levi would. So he'd charge you 15. And you know he's ripping you off. But he's got the power and the authority of the Roman government behind him. And there's nothing you can do about it. So he made a lot of money, but he also made a lot of enemies. Had a bunch of stuff, but he didn't have any real relationships. And so after Jesus does this incredible miracle, the next thing he does, he calls Matthew. And people are baffled because then Matthew invites all of his friends over to dinner after Jesus looks at Levi and says, hey, come follow me. And they follow him. And then Levi, soon to be Matthew, invites all of his friends over. And there's this moment where already kind of the religious people who claim to hold the religious order of society and culture back then are now already kind of in this moment in Mark chapter 2. And like, what is it that he would invite these people that are so lost to eat with? Why would Jesus do that? And Jesus' response was very simple. He says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've come to call, not to call the righteous, but sinners. He's flipping the whole order after this moment at Cana where he supplies the wine. And then there's this other moment. I don't know if you ever had like an impactful, important moment and it's adults talking. I don't know if you had that experience. And you're adults and you're having an adult conversation, right? And you're trying to have that conversation, and then all of a sudden there's this moment, where you're being interrupted. And you're trying to get your words out, and every time you try to talk, but this is serious because we're in church. And I just need you to stay with me, okay? And finally, this is exactly what happens with Jesus. The next time he's sitting down for a meal, it's a woman who comes in from off the street. And he's dealing with the Pharisees, the most righteous of righteous, outwardly anyways. And they all come in. And as they're having this meal, this woman walks in off the street, and she begins to kiss the feet of Jesus and wash his feet with her hair, sobbing in tears, not even noticing that this was an important discussion between religious leaders. How dare she come off the street, someone so unclean and so reviled in her community? She pays no mind. She's shameless because she has no shame left. And the reason she has no shame left is she realizes something very, very powerful. Jesus took it. He took it. And in this moment, they're all kind of disgusted. And they begin to judge her. And in Luke chapter 3, this is the dialogue. If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Jesus' response is, this woman loves much because she has sinned much and she's been forgiven much. And her faith in me, trusting what I can do, expressed in her tremendous love in this moment. And their minds are blown. Their minds are blown. But it doesn't stop there in the story of Jesus. He would be in another moment that was quite powerful. See, Jesus wants certain things. He wants certain things from people. And you see that in the feeding of the 5,000. In fact, we have a moment where he's there and he has compassion on them, Scripture says, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Sheep without a shepherd, he had compassion. It wasn't because they were hungry. Yes, he fed them. But it's because they had no direction, no one to love them well and teach and guide them well. He recognized he's looking at 5,000, not counting women and children, lost people. But now they're hungry. And he does the miraculous, loaves and fish. And it says in the Scriptures that they were satisfied. Keep in mind, there's a difference between being full and being satisfied. You live in a culture and in a world every single day that's trying to be perpetually full. And all of us like a cup with 100 holes in the bottom. No matter what's poured in, it drains right out. Living to be full is very different than living and being satisfied. And these people weren't just getting food for their bellies and their bodies. Their souls were nourished by the radical teaching of Jesus that flipped the whole kingdom of heaven and let them know that the door is wide open for all of them, that God's plan is not just for a select group of people, but for all people to the very ends of the earth. And they got a piece of that experience with Jesus, that they too could be a part of his family. And they were satisfied. Jesus also wants us present. I don't know about you, but I always get confused, Mary and Martha, to this day. One's super, super busy when Jesus is coming over. It's the person in your family that in 2 weeks, they are the hostess with the mostest. And they are so busy getting all this ready. And those of you that host people, you know how stressful this is to fool an entire group of people into believing your house is always that clean, right? And that you always use the china. No, you don't. Okay, but whatever. And you go through such effort to make this look great, and you put so much of your time, effort, and energy, and it's stressful and exhausting. And those of you that do that, you know exactly what I'm saying. And you can't stand the person who just watches. Are you going to help? What are you doing? They're going to be here in 2 hours, okay? This is the reality of Mary and Martha. And I don't know about you, the way I always keep them straight is I think Martha Stewart. She's busy. Martha Stewart's setting up. That's how I always have remembered it. I know, I'm just sharing that with you. You'll never forget it now. And Martha is just trying to make it look exquisite and amazing. It's for Jesus. She's doing this for Jesus. But don't forget this. Jesus doesn't need anything. He doesn't need us. He doesn't need you. He wants you. And he wants your heart. That's what he wants. And he's in the presence of Mary and Martha. And in that moment, he's trying to say, hey, Mary is just seated at my feet. Mary understands what does it mean to be present with me. That's what I want, to be present. And I don't know about you guys, but this thing is the bane of my existence many times. What does it mean to be present this year, in the moment? But he wants hearts. You know, he finally goes on this epic rant with the Pharisees. And he calls them out because they look so holy. See, they were the people we would have respected back then. You would have seen them walk by and you would have gone, wow, they're amazing. They do everything right. They say all the right things. They seem so disciplined. They say all the right words in every prayer. They have it all straight, okay? They always sound holy. They always seem to do the good things. And Jesus finally tees off on them because they've missed the point. It's not that having a disciplined life or honoring God with your body, your mind, and soul isn't important. But what good is it if your heart misses the heart of God, see? And he finally makes this point when he just tees off on the Pharisees. He's like, listen, you look awesome on the outside. You look great and pure on the outside. But on the inside, you're gross. This is you on the inside. That's his point. Yeah, you look great. But what's on here, what's in your heart, it's all kinds of messed up and dirty. And they all know, listening to him, there's nothing they can do to fix that. They only know how to fix this, but not what's in here. It's a great reminder. You know, I don't know about you guys. If there's a hair on a single dish, I will get it. If there's a bug walking near the plate, I'm going to see it. If there's something from a piece of vegetable, like a sticker that someone forgot to take off, you want to know whose plate that's going to end up on? Mine, okay? And maybe that's you. That's just the experience, though. He's reminding them, no matter how great it all looks on the outside, the real problem that's plaguing the soul and the heart and the mind is on the inside. The Pharisees, of course, didn't care too much to hear that. The thing with Jesus is he wants everyone to know him. And this is what Jesus would finally say to the Pharisees, Sadducees, and the teachers of the law. He'd paint a picture of this great banquet. And this is what he would say in Luke 14. He's at a Pharisee's home. And he challenges their whole understanding of what does it mean to be in the kingdom of God. Maybe you've had these moments. You've sat at a table. Things seem like they're going to go well. Things seem like they're going to be cordial. And then that person lets fly that one grenade at the table. You start to sweat. You can feel the tension rise in the air. You're not even sure if the air conditioner's on anymore. It's that uncomfortable. That's exactly what the Pharisees attempt to do to Jesus. And he paints a picture of the kingdom of heaven from this table, surrounded by people who do not care for him, do not like him, about what the kingdom of heaven is like. And this is what he says. When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you'll be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. What's he really saying? Those are all the people that if you had some physical ailment back in the day, if you had some kind of a problem, that they came to the conclusion that it was because of either your sin or the sin of your family members, which is why you were the way that you were. That was their conclusion. And so Jesus starts to point them back to, no. I don't want you to invite the people that are the most honored guests. I want you to surround your table with the least, the last, and the lost. All the people that you think are unworthy to be at the table, that's who I want invited. This flies in the face of everything they'd come to believe as followers of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, what's your version of it? Well, maybe you all remember this. Your version of it, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We're talking about the kiddie table. That's right? Unworthy to share the room of the distinguished adults, right? The kiddie table. Remember sitting at the kiddie table, right? And they chop up your food nice and fine so that you get to be at the kiddie table, and all the adults get to do the adults thing and talk about the adult stuff. And then one day, after sitting in what is the equivalent of Thanksgiving purgatory, you finally get to ascend up the golden steps up to the important table and be with the adults. And then what happens whenever we're the adults? What happens? You remember the kiddie table? Who can forget it? It's terrible. And once you graduate up, what's your thought? Once you've gotten here, once you've ascended to greatness, go back to the kiddie table. You remember it's terrible, but we keep perpetuating it. The kiddie table. He had this moment with Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, this short dude. He's up in a sycamore tree. He just wants to see Jesus. He also has a history of ripping people off. Zacchaeus doesn't even belong at the kiddie table. He doesn't belong in the house. He doesn't belong on the street where anybody associated with Jesus would ever hang out. And Jesus spots Zacchaeus. And in the most bizarre, awesome way a guest could, hey, I'm coming to your house. Not like, do you mind if I come over? Hey, what do you got planned? No, why? Why didn't he care? He doesn't care because he's after Zacchaeus. He's after what's in here. And he lets Zacchaeus know, I'm coming over. And Zacchaeus is so overcome by God's grace. And I know, don't misunderstand me. I know we've had experiences in this room. I have too, that are mind-blowing. And how did God work in those moments? And God reached down, He did all these amazing things. And I know sometimes there is a thought that's out there. And it's prevalent, right? Like that sometimes we feel like, or we can feel like we are choosing Jesus. I'm going to invite you, Jesus. But have you noticed how many times He just shamelessly crashes situations? He engages. Now, I'm not saying God isn't over and under it through, but the number of times where God's like, yeah, I'm just going to enter into this mess. Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house. Levi, come follow me. Levi wasn't looking for anything that day. His whole world flipped upside down. This is the heart of God. Now, things finally crescendo. Because after 3 years of meals and teachings and awkward interactions, Jesus is gathered with His disciples. Come on up, fellas. You can sit right there. It's crazy. He's gathered with His disciples, and in John, verse 33, He actually calls them children. He has such tender language for them. And when they first walk into the upper room, they're not having like a Top Gun moment, like who's the best of the best. There's assigned seating for wherever you rank. That's kind of like the custom of the day. It's sort of like the matriarch or the patriarch of a family typically sits right there or right there at the head of the table. It's not all that different. And up to this point, they hadn't established, like, well, who's the guy? Who's where? And we're going to get more into the seating chart and stuff like that next week. But before they even really get into the moment of the meal, like the the depth of the meal, Jesus does something that makes no sense to all of them because he's the honored guest. And Jesus, it says, takes off his microphone and loses it and breaks really expensive property of Pilgrim Lutheran Church. Jeff's over there sweating. And their minds are blown. Because what they're thinking is they're like, this is below your pay grade. You're too good for this. We should be washing your feet. You're the top of the food chain, man. He looks at Peter. And Peter's like, you shouldn't be doing this. He doesn't just wash Peter's feet. He washes the disciples' feet. This is a profound moment where Jesus would show them what true servant-hearted leadership looks like. He would call them his children. And like children, they can't possibly understand the gravity of the moment. They have no understanding of what the next 12, 24 hours could even look like. And it says that after Jesus had washed all their feet, and after he had taken care in this moment, thank you guys, here you go, thank you, go ahead, you can go back. I don't know if they ran off like that, I'm not sure. He would tell them, this is the kingdom of heaven. To be a servant, to be the greatest among you is to be the least among you. I did not come to be served, I came to serve. Such is the kingdom of heaven. Such is what it looks like in the early church. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it should feel like. This is its purpose. And I have a little challenge for you to think and pray about over the next 2 weeks. One is, if you have a young person, the youngest one amongst you who's willing to pray this Thanksgiving in front of your family. If they're not, that's okay. Don't make it awkward or weird. But if it's been years since you've heard the heart of a child, there are few things more moving. Most of us as adults have forgotten the simplest things that we should be thankful for, and yet you will hear a child lift that up to God. You will be seated at a table in 2 weeks that has more of a spread at it than 2,000 years worth of kings and royalty, picked and pieced together of sauces and dishes and every kind of accompaniment that in some cases came from all over the globe. Thousands of years, that's unthinkable to have all of that on one table. The first step to worship of God is gratitude. It's thanksgiving. It's being thankful for the simplest of things is the first act of worship. And so I would humbly invite you into that this season, that it not just be something that we try to get through, but you take the time to think about and ponder and pray and thank God for the simplest of joys that he provides and has provided. Because this may be you, but make no mistake, every bit of it came from him. And your prayers are heard, your prayers are rightly received, not because we're awesome in this room, but because God is. That he would take the most distinguished of dinner guests and allow him to be shamed, and Jesus would hand himself over to be shamed, the lowest of lows, nailed to a cross, exchanging his life for ours, and 3 days later he would destroy sin, death, and Satan for all of eternity. So he hears your prayers. He loves you in this room by His grace and His mercy. Amen. Let's pray.